Hi, I'm Rita. Welcome back to my booktube channel, Life Worth Reading. Today I'll be doing my first dedicated video review, and that is for Dark Lover by J.R. Ward. Listen, I went into this book with such an open mind. I went into it hoping I would like it, quite honestly, but y'all set me up. And I want to talk about that because I feel betrayed that so many people like this book when it is so not good. Like, it is so not good. Just a little quick disclaimer before we get started, because I just know that maybe there's some people out there that might interpret what I'm trying to say differently, but I am not trying to shame anyone for enjoying this book. I've seen the reviews, like a lot of people love this, a lot of people love this whole series, and I respect that wholeheartedly. I really don't have anything against this book. I just think it wasn't good. And I had a lot of actual problems with it, but that doesn't mean that I'm better than anyone else. It doesn't mean that I'm like better than you if you like the series and I didn't. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So Dark Lover, this book is about our main character Wrath, who is the only purebred vampire left in the world, and he is part of the Black Dagger Brotherhood that are trying to fight for the survival of their species. So there's this Black Dagger Brotherhood that protects the rest of the civilian vampires. And then there are the Lesners, which are humans that have sold their souls to the Omega, which is kind of like the devil, you know, like the dark side basically, and they are trying to eliminate the vampires. So there's basically this war going on between vampires and the Lesners, and so Wrath is supposedly their king, but he doesn't want to be their king, he doesn't want to be their leader, but he is. And then one of the brothers dies so dramatically. By the way, why the hell did this other vampire have to die with a car bomb? Like, it really, if you haven't read this book, it really does feel like I'm making it up, right? But basically this book opens up with this character called Darius asking Wrath for help because he has a half-human daughter that he's trying to protect because she might go to the transition soon to vampires, which is really complicated and not safe, and so she needs someone's help, and Darius asks Wrath to do so, but Wrath refuses because he's a bad boy and he doesn't like nobody. So he's just really bad to the bone. He's a baddie and he doesn't want to help Darius help his daughter. So yeah, but then Darius dies with a car bomb. He just literally explodes, which I thought was a really dramatic way to kill a vampire. I know they're harder to kill, but J.R. Ward specifically mentions that vampires can die with like being shot and all of that. So why did this character have to die with a bomb? Was I the only one that thought it was a little too dramatic for no reason at all? Like, he could have just been shot in the head and he would have died. Moving on. So Wrath feels really bad that his brother, they're not actually blood related, but that his brother just died. So he goes on to find this daughter. And that half-daughter is Beth. She is 25. Don't worry, she's legal. Still weird because Wrath is like over 300 years old, but she's legal. So Beth, she is unseasoned. I wasn't gonna start with that, but let's just go there. She is a basic bitch. She's a journalist and she's always in contact with the police force because she's always trying to get the juicy stories. She's always trying to get off the record comments from them. So she's always in contact with them, and she is so basic. That's all I have to say about Beth's character. She is the Tessa of the vampire world. Like, she is full-on Tessa from After. So unseasoned, such a bland character. So yeah, basically they meet and they fall in love because it is a romance. So that's what happens. Like I mentioned, I went into this book hoping that I would like it, even though I had never read an erotica, especially with vampires. But I didn't, because like I said, I was literally about to call her Tessa. Beth, she is so unseasoned. Her whole personality is that she sometimes says no to Wrath. So like that's her backbone of her character, is that she sometimes says no to him, but any other personality, she does not have it. Which makes me pose the question, how does the last purebred vampire, the most baddie vampire on earth, fall in love with such a bland character after not loving anyone for over 300 years? Like, really, in 300 years, you didn't meet one woman that was more interesting than Beth? What kind of a bland world is this? And speaking of their romance, for such a baddie that Wrath is, you know, you would expect him to be, I'm not gonna say evil because you already know he's not evil. He's on the good side, at least in their world. But you would expect him to be a little more or a little less tame than what he is. But he is such a softie, and sometimes not in a good way, like in an unrealistic way. I love a good, soft male character. I love a good old sensitive, not afraid to show off his feelings type of man. But Wrath was just unrealistically so. Like, he spends the whole, like, first third of the book being like, I am so bad, guys. Like, I am so evil. My whole name is Wrath. Stay away from me. I'm Harden. I'm dark Harry Styles fanfic. But then, like, he meets Beth and suddenly, like, every time she moves, he's like, Beth, where are you going? And starts crying. Because he just loves her so much that he can't help but cry every time she's away from him. Which I thought was just not the redemption arc I wanted. It was just too fast. And Insta-love. Have I said Insta-love? Because this book was Insta-love to the max. And I know they're supposed to be vampires. Their whole attraction to each other is different than human attraction. I get that. But oh my god, like, we could have built a little more tension, but there was no tension at all. They just saw each other and they were like, let's fuck. Also, speaking of their inhumane attraction to each other, I thought that that was so lame. Like I said, I could have used a lot more tension, and I thought we had a lot of more resisting to do to the temptation of each other, but there was no there was no stopping them. Okay, Wrath visits Beth for the first time, actually the second time, because the first one he wipes her memory, but he visits her at her home, like late night. She thinks it's a whole ass home invasion, right? Because there's this giant man dressed in leather looking at her inside her house, and she's just like, touch me. And I'm reading this and I'm like, what? 5 seconds ago, you thought that this man was robbing your house, invading your home, but you take one look at him and you're like, touch me, fuck me? Did I miss something? Are home invasions hot now? Did I miss the memo on that? But yeah, and Wrath is just like, no, I'm here to protect you. I'm here to, like, look out for you. Don't worry about it. And she's just like, okay, fuck me. And he's like, no, I'm here to protect you. And she's like, okay, but fuck me, though. And he's like, no. And she's like, touch me. And then they just fuck. I don't know if all dark romances are like this, but worse than insta-love is insta-lust. Like, they had no resistance to each other. They had no tension between them. He invaded her house and she was already begging him to touch her. And I was just like, this is so lame. Like, give me some angst. Like, give me some resistance. Give me some, like, actual worthy attraction to each other. Because this was, like, vampire attraction, which I get because this is a vampire book. But I wish we could have seen a little more human side to that. A little more temptation and like, control, I would say. Because they were, like, completely out of control. Now, moving on before I get to the funny parts again, the thing that bothered me the most about this book was the way J.R. Ward wrote women, especially sex workers, in this book. It was absolutely disgusting. It was despicable. And I can't believe that more people aren't talking about it or haven't talked about it enough, in my opinion, because the way that she wrote these women were so horrific and just totally unnecessary to the actual plot of the story that I found it to be so disgusting. So I'm going to talk about it now. I'm going to let it off my chest because that was the thing that bothered me the most. I knew that I might have a problem with the story when we opened with a sexual assault scene. So with Beth walking home after work and being sexually assaulted and nearly raped by this man, which I thought was also really unnecessary to start. I know this is dark romance and shit, but I thought it was just really unnecessary to start with our main character getting assaulted and being scared for her life. I thought that was really wrong of J.R. Ward to write this because I'm really tired of authors writing sexual assault to build character and build personality when it's really just unnecessary trauma and unnecessary plot points to bring to the story. But anyway, But yeah, the way that she wrote all these male characters thinking about these women was just so disgusting. It was really upsetting content. And I'm gonna read some quotes from it, so if that upsets you, please do skip for a little bit. So like I said, Beth has a lot of contact with these police officers, and we see, because this book is written in third person, so you get a lot of the thoughts of a lot of people in general. And there's this character called Butch. He is the detective that's friends with Beth, and the way that he thinks about prostitutes is so disgusting, especially because he participates, like he sleeps with prostitutes, like he participates in the sex work, but then he just totally shit talks prostitutes in a way that's so disgusting. And I thought it was just so unnecessary. Like, why in a story about vampires do we have to read so much shit about prostitutes? You know, it was so weird. But yeah, like there's this one prostitute that's at the police station, and she walks over to him and she says, "Hey, detective," and this is what he thinks. "She would have been pretty," he thought, "if she put the crack pipe down and slept for about a month straight." Why did it have to think this about this woman that was just talking to him at the police station? She was just like, "Hi, detective," and he was like, "Yeah, she would have been pretty if she put the crack pipe down." Why is this happening? Like, why? And also, this was Butch. He always thought these really wrong things about them, but the worst part was our main villain. He was Mr. X. And I know he's supposed to be a villain and all of that, so I do get that he's supposed to be actually evil and bad and not a good character. I get that, but again, it was just so unnecessary, the involvement that sex workers had to do with the story. So basically, Mr. X is also a listener, so he's a human that has sold his soul to the Omega, and he's trying his hardest to capture vampires and end their species and kill them all. So his thought process, the way he's gonna do this is, I'm gonna kill prostitutes. Why? I don't know. I'm gonna kill prostitutes, and then civilian vampires, which are not part of the Black Dagger Brotherhood, are gonna be attracted to the blood, and then I'm gonna capture them. So he's using these prostitutes as bait to capture vampires, you know? And the way that he just talks about these women, it is so horrifying. There's this one that he kills, and he like smells her blood because they have these types of supernatural powers also. So he smells her blood, and he says his nose detected all manner of disease, and he wondered if she'd known she had an advanced case of hepatitis C. He figured he was doing her a favor, sparing her an unpleasant, creeping death. Like, why did J.R. Ward give all these male characters thoughts about sex workers being disgusting and drug users and unclean and just full of diseases and just so worthless? It was really annoying. And also, this character has an assistant, and here is what he said about like the receptionist: "The jacked woman who had arms big as a man and no breasts to speak of. Her contradiction never ceased to amaze him. In spite of the fact that a raging case of penized envy caused her to take steroids and pump iron like a gorilla, she insisted on wearing makeup and doing her hair. In her cropped t-shirt and leggings, she looked like a bad drag queen. She disgusted him. You should always know who you are," he thought, "and who you aren't." Okay, this book was written in 2005. Okay, I get that. There wasn't as much awareness back then. There wasn't so much sensitivity around these topics. But really, nobody that has recently read this book talks about how disgusting these characters' thoughts are. Yeah, I know, like, he's the villain, he's the bad guy, but really, like this is all in J. Ward's head. You know what I mean? Like, why would she have to put a woman that looks like a man as his receptionist so he can have these thoughts about her and say that she looked like a bad drag queen? I don't know. I thought that was really uncalled for, really unnecessary to a freaking story about vampires. And I wish that J.R. Ward had just stayed away from that and just focused on the freaking vampires, because that was the whole point of the story, right? To talk about vampires. But okay. That was the thing that bothered me the most, and it was present throughout all these books. I'm not going to mention all the quotes that I do have, but it was just really upsetting content that I thought was just so unnecessary to the story. It wasn't a plot point. It was not something that had happened. It was not obligatory to portray bad characters. There was so much she could have done with this villain, and there's so much more that she could have done with these bad characters without touching on such gender-based violence, and without touching on sex workers, and without having to stab that industry and talk so badly about all these women. You know what I mean? I thought that was just really unnecessary to this overall story that she was trying to tell. So that really bothered me, and that, like, my rating because of that, like, went downhill. That was the thing that I hated the most about this book, and I know it was written a long time ago, but I think it is still important that we talk about it because it is still here, like, it is written down, and I can't just read it and ignore it. Something else that kind of upset me is that you can tell me if I'm wrong because maybe I just missed it in the book, but Rath tells Beth that her father sent him, so she was adopted. She was in foster home because her mother died at birth, giving birth to a half vampire daughter, and her dad had to stay away from her, so she never met like either of her parents. So when Rath tells her that her father sent him, she's obviously unconvinced, like she is not just ready to go and talk to this man, which I get, obviously. But it bothers me because she never truly knows who her father was. Okay, let me explain this. At the beginning of the book, when Darius dies in the car bomb outside the club, Beth knows about it. Like, Beth goes to the crime scene because her police friend tells her this story so she can have like the first look at this story and this crime so she can report on it. And so she's at this crime scene. She knows that this man just died, and Rath never tells her that that man was her father. You know what I mean? So she knows that her father recently died because Rath tells her. She's seen pictures of him. She goes to his house, his mansion. She gets to know him, but she's never granted the connection that he was the man that died in that crime scene where she was. Like, he was the man that died with the car bomb. And I thought that that was so weird. I wish that Rath would have just told her how he died so she could have formed that connection, because I thought it would be a lot more meaningful to her to know that, wow, fuck, like, I was at that crime scene, like, that was my father and I didn't know. And I thought that was really weird, but that was just a minor detail that I wanted to get out of my chest. And I think that the last thing that I'm going to touch on is the whole point of the book. So this book is a dark romance, okay, that is supposed to be heavy on the erotic side of things. So you can imagine my disappointment with the actual steamy scenes that we get. What? What? They had as bland of sexy times as Beth's character. Like, it was so stale. It was so fast. Like, J.R. really wrote a dark romance where she didn't want to write sex scenes or like good, actually worth it sex scenes. I thought that the sex was so bland. I thought that, again, like, their otherworldly attraction to each other is fine until one point, because they don't even enjoy the sex that they have because they're just so instantly so turned on by each other that it's over just like that, and it's over within like a page. I don't know, I didn't think it was really hot. I thought it was so stale, and I was really unimpressed by it in a dark romance that's supposed to be really erotic. So that's just my take on it. I find it to be quite boring, and it didn't make up for the praise that I heard about this book and how sexy it was. But maybe it was just because I didn't find Rath very attractive, I would say. You know, like, I wasn't really attracted to his character, so maybe that's why. And also Beth was just so basic that I couldn't even enjoy her as well. So not hot in my opinion. Y'all tricked me. Y'all tricked me for real. I will say that this book was really addictive. Like, I read this unreasonably fast. I was really curious to see where the story was going, so I'm going to give the author points for making such an entertaining and actually compelling story. But other than that, I'm not going to continue on with the series. I'm glad that I read this just so I can say that I have, like, and I always want to try new things in books, and I always want to like keep an open mind towards books. So I'm glad that I read it, but it really wasn't for me, and I give it 2 stars. And I'm sorry that I had to make this little rant review. I know literally nobody cares, but I just had to, like, let this out of my chest, you know? I had to. So basic Tessa-like characters and brooding bad vampires that are actually really lame on the inside don't do it for me. And so if any of you have read this or the series and you think that it does get better, do let me know. But for now, I don't think that I'm going to continue on with the series, and I'm still mad at J.R. Ward for writing women in the way that she did. So thank you so much for watching this. I know literally nobody cares what I thought about this book, but I had to do this quick little rant about it because I had a lot of thoughts, and if I had left this for my February wrap-up, I would have talked for an hour. So I'm glad that at least this review is already done. And you know what, if you have any other dark romance recommendations, I didn't completely hate the vibes, you know, I just didn't like this book in particular or the characters. So if you have any other better recommendations that you want to give me, I would be up for it because I'm always open to reading different types of stuff. As always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content, and I'll see you in my next video. I hope you have a nice day, and always remember that life is worth reading.